Welcome, everyone. Looks like everybody is here. Welcome to this week's Midday Connect, the Viewpoint Simulations Takeover. Today, we will talk about strategic decision making in an early stage startup. But first, I wanted to go ahead and introduce myself and figure out some of the logistics for today's activities because today is going to be more of a collaboration activity. We are going to take on the roles of some of the early stage founders in our organization, but should be relevant to anybody else who is in a strategic leadership position, a decision-making position. Maybe you're in the early stage startup community and you just want a better perception of what other individuals that you're working with are trying to accomplish in their day-to-day, and maybe you need a better understanding of how somebody else might approach your own role. So these are some of the things that we will work on today. My name is Fiona Hayes, and I am the CEO of Viewpoint. So we make a collaboration tool specifically geared towards higher education, but also any form of training that involves getting individuals to think outside of the lecture room and to focus on those interpersonal interactions, connecting with their collaborators. Maybe that's colleagues, workforce training, maybe that's in an educational setting. But we want to make it really easy for individuals to learn from one another and to take those skills back to their day-to-day work environments. So my background is in healthcare and higher education. I started as an audiologist in my first life, and then I taught at the University of Utah for 5 years. Most of the teaching that I was doing was clinical training, and then we shifted to an online setting, and I had to do a quick pivot and figure out how can we use tools to our advantage when we are teaching these practical skills in an online setting. So that's the perspective I come to this with. I now run Viewpoint, and we are doing our best to make it accessible to as many students as possible. So we'd love your feedback after this activity. Any advice that you have for us or input that you want to share, we're very open to it. And I also want to introduce the inventor of Viewpoint and our Chief Learning Officer, Elizabeth Gerber. Dr. Elizabeth Gerber, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Fiona. Hello, everybody. Welcome. As Fiona explained in her own situation as an educator, the ability to create engaging experiences for my students is the primary motivation for the work that we have put into Viewpoint. We're excited to share it with all of you. We see the potential for lots of applications of the kind of collaborative learning and collaborative engagement that Viewpoint supports. So we hope that you enjoy the experience that we've set up for you today. And we are very much looking forward to your feedback, your questions, your comments, your suggestions, and hopefully your ongoing partnership with Viewpoint in ways that might make sense for all of us. So just a wonderful welcome to everybody. We hope you enjoy the time together.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. Everyone who is on this call, in the registration, they should have received a link to sign into the Viewpoint platform. So if you'll check your emails, there is a sign in login information there. So we'll give everybody a moment to get set up. Basically, all you have to do is click the link that is set up there. You'll see a password reset, and you can go ahead and set up a Viewpoint account, and you can sign in via that link. And once everybody is in, then we'll break it into groups and we will assign roles and we'll get started.
So Fiona, I'm a step ahead of you. I'm starting to assign the roles. So as people log in, this is a random process that Viewpoint does. It randomly assigns the roles. So we're working through that right now. And so when you sign in, you may need to refresh because it takes just a minute. We're about 2/3 of the way through. And you will see what your role is as soon as it's assigned to you.
So I'll go ahead and get started introducing this activity so that you can have some background, and I'll do a quick tutorial while everybody's getting logged in. And then there will be we had 10 last minute registrations, which is wonderful. So you will see when you log in, there will be a handful of people who are not yet assigned to a group. Those 10 individuals hang out with us for just one moment when we get to that point. So I will give you a quick preview just so you can see how our software works once you are logged in. And so you have access to everything in the platform readily available. So if you haven't seen Viewpoint before, Viewpoint on the back end lets educators connect and create simulated case study environments. So you should be able to see my screen here. Liz, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. So this is what the login page will look like from the participant view. Again, Viewpoint allows instructors to create simulated learning environments in their classrooms. So from the participant view, it's going to work a lot like you would expect from Slack or Microsoft Teams. But just a quick overview to get you oriented before we get started. This is the simulation overview that will pop up when you first log in. You can access this anytime by selecting simulation overview. And this will be the premise for the activity that we're running today. So today we have over 50 individuals in the entrepreneurial space. We will be taking on roles such as Chief Executive Officer, Chief Learning Officer, Chief Technology Officer, and making decisions for an early stage startup based on the information that you'll see is assigned to you in the platform once you get your role. There is a calendar feature, so everybody should be able to have access to the calendar. So to help us keep on track, we're doing our quick introduction right now. We'll move shortly into group formation, and then we have 2 breakout sessions. The first one will be around budget allocation. The second one will be around hiring strategy, and then we'll move towards group presentation so we can report back and see what we've learned. In the platform, there's an option for announcements in your dashboard. You will see any announcements that we put into the simulation will pop up live real time. This social media feed functions a lot like Twitter. So if you would like to use that and to communicate with one another in any way, you might see some interesting comments pop up there, which can be really helpful as we're working through these activities. There's also groups and roles. So you'll see the group that you are assigned to, or the role that you're assigned to, as well as the group that you have been assigned to. And then over here on the left-hand side, you can dive deeper into each of those features. So groups and roles, there's an in-platform messaging system to collaborate with, a scheduling feature, again, deep dive into the schedule we already overviewed. Any resources that have been assigned to you, you'll notice lots of these roles already have pre-assigned resources, so feel free to view those in your decision making. And then surveys is a place where you may see an option to take a quick survey at the end of this activity. So that's the premise for using the Viewpoint platform. That was a really, really brief overview. So if anybody is confused, there are these little question mark buttons along the way that you can select, and it will walk you through what that tool or feature is for. We'll jump into it shortly, but does anyone have quick questions about the platform itself? If anybody had trouble getting logged in, send us a chat message, and after we break out, we will go ahead and get everybody sorted there. So the background for this activity, this is an early stage education technology startup, and you will see you have in your resource tab all of the reference materials that you might need to move through this activity. The premise of this activity is to give everybody some experience being a decision maker in a way that they might not currently have exposure to in their role. So everyone will be taking on a role. Most likely that role will be something that you have not participated in before. So we know that the value of role playing allows us to take on different perspectives, different experiences. We want you to take away how this experience can benefit your organization. And it's partially a demo of what the platform can do, but the real value is this is an opportunity to problem solve together. We anticipate that most of you are facing similar challenges in your organization. So there is an opportunity to collaborate. If you are taking from experience that you have outside of this particular activity and pulling that into working through some of these challenges we're trying to solve, that will be amazing. And we really hope that you take a lot away from today. The premise of this activity is rooted in the experience that we have being in the education technology space. You will see some common threads for any of you that are familiar with viewpoint simulations, but these are a simulated activity, so not every detail is real life. You'll see that some of it is simplified in a way that makes it a little bit more relatable if you don't have background in this environment. So please take this as an educational opportunity. And if you have any further questions and do want to explore a little bit where there's overlap, I'm happy to talk to you about that after the session. Anything else you'd like to add, Liz?
No, I'm excited to get moving forward.
Awesome.
So everyone should be assigned to a role.
So we should be able to jump into our breakout sessions versus via viewpoint. So the way this works best is if you do have two screens, if you keep your Zoom room up on the main screen and then have your viewpoint simulation next to it, or you can split your laptop screen so you can still see the people in your group and use the platform to collaborate as well. So for our first activity, we're going to jump into a budget allocation discussion. So in your viewpoint activity, the first thing you'll do is explore your role. You'll get familiar with what your role in this activity is and what your key responsibilities are in this position. And then you will have a resource. Most of you will have a resource that you can take a look at, use as your background, and then you're going to share that with the other participants in your group so you can come to a mutual decision on what the best way to allocate the budget you've been assigned is. So we'll take a moment for everybody to jump into their breakout rooms. So you'll see, Liz, did you get the breakout room set up in Zoom?
Yep, they should all be set up. If you click on breakout rooms below, you'll see there are 12 rooms. There are roles. Each of the roles has a number at the end. So you might be like CTO 4. You'll go into room 4. You might be CEO 7. You'll go into room 7, etc. There are a couple of extra roles that we created at the end because we had more people registered, yay, than we expected. So if your role has 2 numbers after it, so maybe like 10-3, just hang out for a minute and then we'll figure out which room to put you in. So anybody that, if your viewpoint name just has a role and a single number, just go into the room that corresponds to that number. And then the rest of you will get you into a good room in just a minute. That make sense? Okay.
Sure. So enter simulation.
Go to enter simulation. Yep.
Gotcha.
And then you should see down on the bottom left, when you get to the dashboard, it'll say what your role is. And if anybody needs help with that, raise your Zoom hand and we can help you navigate through. Actually, Fiona, do you want to put up the dashboard so folks can see where that is on your? Thank you.
And for some of you, it looks like we might need to click the circle with the dots to see the breakout rooms if your screen's too small. So here is our dashboard. If we need to back out and enter the simulation, you can do so. I know your screen will look a little bit different here, but you can do so with this enter simulation button at the bottom of the tile that you have in your account. All right. And then you'll jump into your Zoom breakout room when you figure out which breakout room you're supposed to be in. All right, looks like everyone is back. Well, welcome back. Thanks for taking the time to participate in that activity. I am excited to hear some of the takeaways and the plans that everyone came up with, and then we'll circle back after we do that and talk about some of the common challenges things that we have to work through in a startup. As you can tell, we have various levels of familiarity with the tools that we're using. We have various levels of information sometimes in the startup world. Sometimes we don't have all the background that we feel like we personally need to make a decision. And so we are taking some liberties from time to time on, how do I make this work for my team? What can we do? How can we get creative? Maybe I don't have all of the members of my team that I would like. Maybe I don't have all of the budget. I heard as I jumped through some of the breakout rooms, some of the questions that were coming up. And so I think what might be really helpful is if each CEO, and if your group didn't have a CEO, if you have another leader that would like to step in there and just give us a quick overview of what your team decided to do, A, with your budget, B, with your hiring, but then also tell us some of the questions that came up through that process and some of the discussion points or maybe learnings that you had as we went through this. We'd love to hear those. So we could start with team one, if you'd be willing to have your CEO share a little bit about the experience here and how you chose to answer those questions. And you should have screen sharing. I know a couple of people had created documents, so you should have screen sharing permissions if anybody wants to share those. We'll start with
Well,
team one.
in the screen sharing situation, I'll rely on my CTO, my
Fabulous.
intrepid CTO, who did a great job.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, I think as we were leaving the breakout room, we all agreed that $1 million isn't very much. So that's our first realization. But we tried to spread it around a little bit, and then we spread it around pretty simply, and then we tried to break it out a little bit. We had a little bit of confusion of cost of sales and or COGS, goods sold, because it's a platform that's already created. We wrestled with the idea of how much marketing and sales, how many engineers we should have, how much marketing people, how many salespeople we should have. Should they be more senior? Should they be less senior? So this is what having said that, this is what we came up with. The idea of product development, the hard costs of product development, the idea of R&D, leaving something in R&D, so we could expand or come up with new things to deliver along to our established customers. Office and overhead were an all remote situation, but we had some operational costs with hosting that would scale. The amount would go up as we scale and have more clients, and cybersecurity and all the various things that go with that. So we tried to put most of the money is in acquisition cost. Although the marketing customer acquisition seems pretty juicy, it includes the salaries for salespeople, marketing coordinator, and the cost of client acquisitions. So I'm sure Nate or Jocelyn would be able to fill in any holes that I woefully missed.
That was good. We decided the exec team's going on equity at this point. They already got the money. So.
We pulled back, exactly. And I'm just waiting for the next time to get to the golf course. So I leave it all up to these guys to get everything done, which ironically, the microcosm is basically what ended up doing. Nate and Jocelyn did most of the heavy lifting during our breakout.
Is there anything that surprised you about this experience, or anything else that, we ran into some challenges, but we had some good experience on the team to overcome them? Thoughts there?
I think I was tickled to learn from both of these. I had two very good team members to be learning from. I was completely shooting from the hip and being very broad strokes, like a senior CEO type would be. My experience is that the founder is the old senior guy or gal, and the CEO is the young hotshots straight out of Wharton or whatever. So we kind of had a reverse role on that. So that, I don't know if that's a surprise, but that was kind of, that in effect is what our breakout room consisted of. Two very smart, a CMO and a CTO that were very sharp, and a CEO that was willing to, endorse their good ideas.
Mhm.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I don't think we had a group 2 when we divided out our breakout rooms. Let's jump to group 3. And if I missed anyone at the end, we'll come back. Group 3 CEO.
Our CEO had to depart at noon. He had a pressing engagement on his helicopter, I think. So to that point, I think we spent a lot of our time trying to interpret the data and understanding certain things such as where the revenue was directed. The 20,000, is that referencing annual contracts? Is that new revenue? Is that returning revenue? Is it individual users? Is it monthly? Is it annually? And so some of that we just kind of went around it, but what we really focused on was allocating towards 2 big buckets, and Elaine and Spencer and Parker, please, come in at any point. But we talked a lot about getting very clear on user acquisition methods, how we acquired those customers, getting user feedback, user data, and defining our user personas. This would determine how much, to the last groups, like how much goes towards marketing. Are we ready to scale? Do we have champions to go to conferences? Are we ready for conferences? Are we doing kind of a ground campaign and flying out to users and building or putting in tools such as a Chameleon or a Hotjar to learn and follow user clicks to understand what their common path is? So we really want to spend money on understanding that user to understand then where we allocate. The second one was really around kind of understanding the revenue and the data we have now in our cycle to get from 20,000 to 1.5 million in a year, when, if you're on a July 1 to June 30 university buying structure, what's that? So customer acquisition costs, customer retention rates, customer churn, and then average revenue per user would then guide also where we head from there. Foundationally, we kind of started with, were there elements of the $1 million that we had to be aware of as a group that had certain stipulations that we're already going to allocate certain money? Did we have to work with a research organization in order to show learning gains and allocate 200,000 to WestEd in order to do a study for us? Did we have to go towards a certain market and show penetration? So also, what was the North Star of the million would also then direct where we kind of split on the how much money did we have for our own choices, or how much of it was already determined, and we were trying to do that. The only other area we spent a bunch of time on was recognizing as a younger product, there would be technology debt. And as we think about scaling, what are we thinking about with SOC 2 compliance? What are we thinking about with accessibility? What are we thinking about with a lot of the technology areas, data security, privacy? How much are we going to have to invest in getting the platform to be purchasable by an institution that is taxpayer dependent and relied upon with regulation? So that bucket would be a large one, because you really can't go anywhere if we don't have the university or individual professor form covered from a technology platform perspective. So those were kind of where, so sorry, we didn't actually allocate. We just asked a lot of questions of each other and talked about a lot of things. Anybody in the group have anything else that I maybe glossed over?
Good questions.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that that's fantastic. Part of the purpose of this activity, and I'll jump back, I think someone started to say something, but part of the purpose of this activity isn't always to come to the outcome. It's the discussion points and the collaboration that we do as we move through the process. So when we're doing these types of activities, right now we're coming from a really, really wide breadth of background. But even in our student bodies, when we're in these higher education institutions, we want to get the students seeing from the different perspectives that they're thinking about. And I think that transcends, we can do it on a very micro level when we're talking about one specific task that we're trying to complete. But then we can also, think about, okay, these are the questions that we do have to ask ourselves to even be able to make these decisions. So that's fantastic. So thank you for sharing those. Yeah. And did anyone else have anything to add to that? Okay, we'll move on to, I think we're on group 4.
Yeah, we got a late start to this, so we kind of had to do a rapid fire on this, so we may not have covered everything. But as we took a look at it, we made several assumptions on this, like the competitor list is mostly comprehensive, and that the budget that we have is already sorted out. So either we have a line of credit, we can finance with our revenues, whatever. We weren't worried about making the expenses that we have on our P&L make sense at the moment. So we assumed that it was an extra $1 million from another investor, capital raise, what have you, and now we got to figure out what to do with the additional $1 million. So taking a look at it, we took a look at our competitors and the trends. Competitor C looked like they were the weakest and that they were the easiest slice of the pie to go and take. Didn't have much interest in going after competitor B. Small scale, probably would have a difficulty in increasing the average order value or average cart value, what have you, of their clients. And competitor A, we figured that once you get yourself a groundswell of users, they would have a hard time making their costs keep up with a startup coming after them. The benefits we had was that we're scalable and that all of the associated costs that competitor A would have in signing up a new client and, implementation, account management, sales guys that sort of sort this out wasn't altogether necessary for us. We could go after trade schools, some of these lower, smaller scale platforms, and market directly at people. And because it was scalable and such an easy flow, we wouldn't necessarily have to have all those costs associated of acquiring sales and acquiring business. So our view was taking a look at the trends that we've got right now. There's an, groundswell of interest because COVID is demanding higher learning. So all ships are rising, even though they may not have a very good product, which is what we assume of competitor C. So what we have here then is if we can develop for what we expect the problems are going to be in 2026, 2027, and perhaps what people are going to be looking for in 2025, it's a lot of AI, it's a lot of analytics, it's a lot of personalization. And if we don't have that in our platform yet, which we didn't see any indication that we did, it was probably because we didn't have the people here to do so. So the application of the funds would go towards us hiring software developers that would be able to provide those services and solutions. So if we used our data and analytics to create a more personalized platform, that would help us. If we could incorporate AI into not just what we teach, but how the students use the AI, that would probably help us. So if we said, hey, let's put $150K towards our salaries, looking at our forecasts, we didn't really see any other G&A going up or see any of these other costs going up, which sort of, further validated the assumption that we can scale pretty easily and pretty nicely. So if we put 150 into SG&A and we put another 250K into R&D, that'd be 400K total. That should be able to put us in a very nice position for the end of 25, 26, 27 sort of years. And looking at the increase in marketing and sales going from 40 to 250K, basically increasing 210K would produce an extra 1.45 mil. Well, that's a great ratio that I'll take any day of the week, right? So I could put the rest of that 600K in there, assume that I'll probably generate myself an extra 3.5 mil from revenue. And if I take that cash as it's coming in, I just dog food it back into the product and keep putting it back into marketing and sales. By the end of the year, I could increase my sales by a good 5 mil. But that's off of a lot of assumptions.
Yes, it is. And that's one of the challenges I think that we face in early stage startups. We are making assumptions. We might not have data from the previous year to work off of. We might have just stepped into this position because we're a new hire and there's not a definitive role, or your role shifts 3 months in because we see another need or another skill that individual has. And there are some opportunities to make assumptions, and I love to hear the breakdown of how you thought about, what are we going to do moving forward? We do have all these assumptions, and how do I work with these messy assumptions and move things forward? So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Let's move to group 5. Do we have anyone from group 5 still? Group 6. Seven.
Yeah, group 7 here. What I found out was that my CMO misrepresented his skill set when it came to AI. And we were really planning on leaning on him and doing a lot more programming and creating a lot more AI bots to do our marketing and customer acquisition. So in the end, we copy and pasted all these documents into ChatGPT, and it suggested that we look for an early exit. So we ended up selling the business. And
how much did
Love
you
it.
get for it, Mike?
I cannot discuss that at this time, but it worked out really well for the founders. So we're happy.
Like it.
In regards to the actual software itself that we were using, we just found out that in the very beginning, it was a little confusing to, I guess, click through the schedule and find the activity details. And then we didn't see the resources, but it was, so I think we spent 10 or 15 minutes kind of figuring out, trying to figure out where everything was listed. So I guess it was just a little clunky there, but I think I was hoping for a little more AI incorporation, maybe with like decision making, or I don't know.
That's super helpful feedback for us. And that's one of the things, and maybe you could speak to this a little if you want, but I wonder if we were to run an activity like this again, if we structured in a little bit more structural time ahead of time, if that would be helpful, or maybe set up logins the day in advance might be useful, or a week in advance. Do you have any thoughts around that, Mike?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, coming into this blind, right, and seeing this for the first time, it's a little confusing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Mike, can I just add to that though? Like we, our intention wasn't to cause pain or stress, but it was partially to acknowledge that like we all have very limited time. We're just going to throw everybody in. It took a good like 12 minutes to figure it out. 12 minutes is not that long. Maybe it took 20 in some cases. Even 20 minutes is not that long. I hear you. We all hear you that, the value of pre-preparation is obvious. I think you would have had a better and different experience if you had been able to familiarize yourself with the platform in advance. But unfortunately, often we're dealing with groups that don't have that luxury. And so to sort of give you a good sense of like, what's it like to get thrown onto this platform, have to figure it out quickly in real time, hopefully learn from each other in the small groups, and then still see how far you can go. To Fiona's early point about like, we usually don't have the information that we need. So how close can we get? So that's not in any way to disagree. I agree 100%. I hope y'all, were able to get to the point relatively quickly where the features of the platform revealed themselves and you were able to use them. Maybe not as well as if you'd had a bit more time to play around with it beforehand. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for your tolerance and your patience with the uncertainty. We went back and forth about, should we make this available beforehand, and maybe made the wrong decision, but it's a decision that we made to just throw you in. So, and it looks like nobody sunk, everybody swam. So hopefully it wasn't too painful.
No, it was a good exercise. We definitely made some good connections on the team.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I agree. Right.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It used both sides of our brain.
We did. Any Group 8 attendees on still?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful, Alan.
Let me have my other attendees just say hi so you know who we were, or so everyone knows who we were.
No.
Righty.
Is Trent still here?
Oh.
So Trent was in our group, and then we had Trent. Who was our other participant? I'm drawing.
Taylor. It was me.
Taylor Bench. So Elizabeth, I'm not sure when you said nobody sank, they all swam. I'm not sure because we have several groups that aren't even here to report what they did. So I'm just going to push back on that a little bit. And I'm also going to say that I would agree. I think you made the right decision not to have us log in a day in advance and review it, because if you really want to know what a student is going to see and how they're going to interact, they're not going to log in a day in advance and see it. So
Not my students.
yeah, I 100% agree with your decision there. But I will say that to me, just starting out with the input on the experience, making it somehow really super, super obvious that the schedule will guide what you should be doing. Even though it says schedule, it's like I've used simulators where the schedule's like, it isn't the, almost if it said start here. And if add a link that said, read your role, and the link took you to that, or then it highlighted that. Then on the next one, read the resources or look at your resources to learn about your situation and read each one. I mean, it would have simplified us finding our way. I was getting close to the feeling of not actually thinking we're actually going to be able to even figure out what in the world we're supposed to do. By the time we hit several minutes, I don't know if it was 10 or 20 minutes in before we even realized we ought to probably, maybe even longer, read the resources. And so that would be my input there. We needed guidance, and Mr. Bench gave us some good guy. He saved our bacon a little bit, helped us figure out what we needed to do. Now, there is a positive aspect to that too. There's a little bit of troubleshooting. Onto the actual, but how did we budget, hire, and so forth? Use a portion of the non-dilutive funding to seek or leverage more investment, maybe 250 to 500K if possible. Maybe a convertible note with a maturity date out there a little ways after we're actually generating something. We talked a little bit about that as a way to allocate that $1 million. Another portion of it to R&D. Thought a little bit about AI to increase our existing or maybe enhance the existing strengths that were listed in the resources of our company. And also maybe AI that could make it easier for instructors to use this. So if they wanted to customize their case study using AI, what development needs to be put in place to make that easier as a sell. Allocating a good portion, probably the remainder and the largest portion of the funding to marketing, and specifically, and we didn't come to all these conclusions really definitively. You're getting my interpretation of our discussion because we ran out of time, really. But several great suggestions came up. One, leveraging the existing, we have some cells already. We have some universities, professors using it, not an institutional contract, since we've only got $20,000 there. We're thinking we need to leverage those relationships with the existing customers, which are professors in universities, so that we can get departmental or institutional contracts in place. Departmental contracts maybe being, I mean, the sales cycle for selling something like an institutional purchase on this is probably kind of long, just from our observation and experience. And so working toward that as aggressively as we can, we need to take advantage of the ones that are already using it to some extent, because we're already a little ways into that, building trust and establishing an understanding of the product and the people using it. Anyway, we thought if we sought institutional contracts somewhere between about 1.5 million, or between about 150K, that'd be 10 institutional contracts to generate 1.5 million goal. If we had 20 institutional contracts at 75K each, that would put us at the 1.5 million. And considering our competitors, it felt like maybe the 20 contracts at 75K would be a more realistic goal, simply because of competitor A targeting very large institutions, and possibly the smaller contracts at 75K would be some of those institutions where there's a gap, an opening in the market that isn't already targeted. Based on the projection of income, or not income, benefits, salary and benefits going from the existing 150K to 300K at the end of 24, and then back down to 250K in the next year, 2025, we thought it may be necessary to work on sales through a commission paid type of contractors for the marketing part of this, at least partially commission paid, so that we can. We felt like that was given the smaller budget. Someone else said $1 million is not an awful lot. That's one way we thought about stretching that $1 million to turn to at least partially commission paid. And then another thought, if it's possible to identify some of those contractors or marketing resources that have any existing relationships with small to mid-sized institutions already, that would allow us to target that gap in the market. And my other two team members here, probably Taylor and Trenton, probably have a lot better way of summarizing this, but it was I thought a pretty good discussion. Once we figured out what direction we were going, you know, we kind of read the resources individually a little bit, but we pulled a couple of them up and just looked at them together, especially the financial pieces. So it worked fairly well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah,
So we are at the end of our time for today. I plan to stay on, so if we have any other groups who would like to share, I'd love to hear it. We do plan to send out a summary after this meeting, not just on, you know, some of the activities that we did today, but more so some of the discussion points that came out around it and how we can take those and apply them to our businesses. Maybe you are an early stage founder and you're looking for some creative solutions that you might not have thought of. I thought a lot of really, really fantastic ideas for problem solving came up today. And my takeaway, my biggest takeaway is we always have things that we can learn from one another and from each other's experiences, backgrounds, networking, and opportunities like this to problem solve, even if they're not necessarily about something that's directly relevant to our organization. Sometimes open up ideas and concepts that we might not have thought of without those conversations. So thank you everybody so much for participating today. I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer, but we really appreciate your time and feedback and insight. And we'll also be sending around a short survey just to see how we can improve this going forward.
Thank you, everybody.